Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about 1996's Mission Impossible and its 4K Blu-ray. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of movie reviews, 4K Blu-ray reviews, lists, and podcasts, we try to do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps the channel out more than by you just simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Mission Impossible is the first and one of the biggest franchises in the world that stars Tom Cruise. The first one was directed by Brian De Palma. It was released in 1996. It was actually written by David Kopp and Robert Towne. Yes, the Robert Towne who wrote Chinatown, The Last Detail, and worked with Tom Cruise on a bunch of his movies, including the first two Mission Impossible movies, Days of Thunder and The Firm. And this was actually the first produced film of Tom Cruise's production company, Cruise/Wagner Productions. This movie had a lot of star power behind it, a lot of great big names in Hollywood attached to it. It was supposed to be a continuation of the 1960s until the early 1970s Mission Impossible TV series, right down to John Voight's character, John Phelps, who was one of the stars of the original TV series, which is why this movie kind of pissed off a lot of people who were fans of the original series, and especially the actors who were in the original series, because they didn't like how that character was portrayed. Because if you've seen this movie, this is a slight spoiler, John Phelps ends up betraying the Impossible team. But actually, this movie follows a really straightforward plot. It's a lot less convoluted than the movies would become. It's also a lot more reserved and pulled back. This is actually a very comparable franchise to how the Fast and Furious franchise ended up. The first film is much more grounded in reality. Not that the other movies aren't grounded in reality, it's just that this one feels more straightforward, a little bit simple, and the stunt work, although great, is a lot more reserved than it would become. You know, we don't see Tom Cruise. Yes, he does jump on a helicopter, but unlike in Mission Impossible Fallout, he's not actually flying that helicopter for real. It's actually done in front of a blue screen, a very noticeable blue screen. But before we get into the weeds on this movie follows around an IMF team. Early in the movie, Tom Cruise's entire team gets killed except for him. He's the only one who survives. They were sent there to get one half of a knock list, which is basically just a list of names and their identities, which is just basically the CIA's list of names that they have out in the field and their true identities, which they separate into two separate lists. They're there to protect half of that list. But unfortunately, the entire team dies, including Emilio Estevez, who dies in a very brutal way, and they showed it on screen. Looks very fake, though, actually. Looks like it was just a fake head that they crushed, but it's still awesome scene. Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt has now been framed with the person who set this all up, who betrayed his team.
This whole operation was flawed. Yeah. You survived.
And now he's on the run. He's got to not only prove his innocence, but he has to prove who the real mole is in IMF. And that's basically what this movie is about. It's pretty straightforward. We get great actors in here, like Jean Reno. This is the first time we see Ving Rhames' character. He would appear in all of the Mission Impossible movies going forward. And he's perfect in that role. Other than Tom Cruise, I think of Ving Rhames when I think of the Mission Impossible franchise. Jean Reno, though, is great in this movie. John Voight is also great in this movie. Like I said, he plays John Phelps, one of the original characters from the original franchise. And John Voight plays his character perfect in this movie. There's plenty of other great actors who pop up in this movie, all of which are doing a great job. Brian De Palma's direction, though, really does shine on the screen. You know, he puts the camera in such different places. If you're a fan of Brian De Palma and you've seen The Untouchables, Blowout, Carrie, you know that Brian De Palma doesn't make straightforward looking movies. They all have a certain beauty to them, and this movie is no different. The cinematography is pretty much perfect. I love what he's doing with the lights on a lot of these close-ups. You know, you got like Ethan Hunt like lurking in the shadows where he's kind of lit in shade and lit in light, almost like saying like, is he the actual mole? We don't know for sure, especially earlier in the beginning of the movie. So I love that the lighting is trying to illustrate that to us so that we don't know. And these close-ups all look beautiful. Then obviously the most famous scene in this movie is when they have to break into the CIA, grab the knock list out of the computer with all this tension that they build up, because they set it up so perfectly how the odds are impossible and we're still going to do it. And then once we get in there, of course, it's a film, so things start to go wrong and we have to overcome. But this scene, the tension, it's one of the most tense scenes in film history. The way it's lit, the way it's shot, it's perfect. The way it's acted, you know, Tom Cruise, again, started here doing all of his own stunts. So that was one thing that I thought was funny when I was watching the extras on the 4K, is that people were like, oh, it's awesome that he does his own stunts. I'm like, man, Tom Cruise has just always been that guy. He just got a little bit more crazier as time went on, and now he's like literally on a suicide mission to end his life by doing one of the greatest stunts ever, I think, but he was still doing them back then. That's perfect, because as far as filmmaking goes, if you can get those close-ups on the actual actor, it really does help to, you know, build the tension like it does in this scene. So that's also perfect. It's not a flawless movie. I don't think the score is that great. I think, you know, obviously the Mission Impossible theme is iconic and actually charted at the time when this was released, because they made a music video and everything for it. But the actual score, sometimes it just doesn't work. It kind of comes off a little bit too playful, and the script itself can be sometimes a little bit too silly. They would kind of pull back on that once we get to like Mission Impossible 3. And then obviously the end scene on the train with the helicopter. You know, I always knock CGI, and the CGI here is not great. It doesn't look good at all. They shot it in front of a blue screen, and it's very obvious. It could be more noticeable now because of the 4K Blu-ray and its resolution increase, but it does kind of take you out of it, and especially for a franchise that going forward relied so much on practical effects. To see it here, it can be a little bit disappointing. But overall, Mission Impossible is a fantastic film. I don't know if it can live up to the last 3 films that we have gotten, but of the original trilogy of movies, I think this is easily the best, and it's still a great little spy movie that stars Tom Cruise. You get some great scenes in here, and I do think that you'll still get something out of this. If you haven't seen the first Mission Impossible movie, I can definitely recommend you checking this one out. So this is my Mission Impossible 4K. This came out in 2018, and when they released every 4K at the time, they released it with these really nice slip covers. Each one has its own design of it. So this goes all the way up to Rogue Nation. Each of them have their own individual color with this nice poster up front, and I really think it works for this. I really love what Paramount did with these solo releases. You could buy them all in a pack as well, 1 through 6, but I like that I actually ended up with all these with their own slip covers. Although, actually, I gotta be honest, some of the ones I got off of Amazon don't have slip covers, which is a little bit disappointing, but the first one here does. So when you pop this off, get the same artwork underneath, which is also appreciated. And because it's Paramount, we get no individual disc design. You get a 4K in black and a Blu-ray in blue. That is a previously released Blu-ray. It's not a downgraded version of the 4K. So that's actually, I believe, the 2007 Blu-ray on there. When you go in the menus and you're watching all the previews, it becomes very obvious, and it's a huge jump from that Blu-ray to the 4K. It's presented in the aspect ratio of 2.41, which is not the original aspect ratio of 2.39. But it is a big upgrade from that Blu-ray. You get now HDR10, Dolby Vision, so it does look just shockingly more beautiful than that Blu-ray. And I didn't think that Blu-ray was the worst. So I watched the 4K first, then I went in and I put the Blu-ray in, and then I wanted to see how it jumps from that Blu-ray to the 4K. And you do notice those jumps in the scenes, just how the colors are fleshed out. The resolution increase is probably the most noticeable. It makes the Blu-ray look almost muddy and faded just because of that. The Blu-ray is also much warmer, much more yellow, whereas the 4K is much more cooler. They definitely played around with the color temperature. Not too much, but definitely enough. I think that it improves on that Blu-ray greatly. And Paramount, when they want to, I've said this a million times, they can put out some of the best looking 4Ks, and these Mission Impossible 4Ks, just a spoiler for them all look just gorgeous. And it starts here. I actually think that this might be the worst looking 4K out of all of them, but that's not really the fault of the film. It's just that I believe that the source material, it is the oldest. It is shot on film, so there's just this little bit level of grain that sometimes can be slightly distracting, especially when it's over white scenes. But other than that, it's like, you know, when they're in the scene with that tension-filled scene in the CIA, like, you can notice the grain just slightly over scenes like that when they're cutting between Tom Cruise's face. But it's not really something that overwhelms the scene. It's just something that you might notice in here that might not be in the later 4Ks. So if you were just comparing them side by side. But again, it is a gorgeous 4K. It's a huge jump from that Blu-ray. This is the definitive edition as far as the visuals go. Now, the audio, what really surprised me with the audio is the amount of audio tracks and subtitles on here. A lot of times now, especially, you won't even have these choices. There's plenty of times where you just open it up. You can't even choose the language. That's it. It's in English with a 2.1 DTS HD mono track on there, and that is all you're getting. You're not even getting, you know, or maybe just a 2.0 mono track rather. So you're just getting nothing. You can't even choose a different language. If you happen to speak a different language, sometimes it can be very unfortunate if you can't watch it with a dub, or, you know, you can't watch it with the subtitles. But I really wanted to point out that Paramount went above and beyond as far as the audio tracks go. Now, if you do speak English, you get a beautiful Dolby Atmos track in here. That's the one I tested out, which is fantastic. Again, you know, you get that Mission Impossible theme playing through your speakers, just blasting. The dialogue is crisp and clear. I never had an issue with that. The action scenes, you know, you're spreading around. all the audio. It's definitely a great audio track, definitely a great Dolby Atmos track. I didn't test the other Dolby 5.1s on here with the other languages, but I imagine they're still pretty good, but I'm sure that the Dolby Atmos track is probably the definitive audio track on here. Probably one of the better ones I've ever heard, actually. It's really phenomenal what they did with the audio on here, which I'm not surprised. If you can mix a good Dolby Atmos track, it usually comes out pretty damn phenomenal, and this is no different. I really do love what they did with this Atmos track. It's definitely perfect. Now, as far as the extras go, there are no new extras on the 4K. The 4K is just straightforward. You just have your choice of your languages, watch the movie, and you can pick the scenes where you want to start. Now, the Blu-ray, like I said, previously released Blu-ray, so all the extras that are on there are the same extras that we have had since that Blu-ray came out. So, they're all split up into little featurettes, like, anywhere ranging from about 5 to 11 minutes. Some pretty good, some better than others. I like how they break down the stunt work. They have a lot of good interviews at the time. There's some little video tributes to Tom Cruise that came out like in about 2005 that they threw on here from like 2005 MTV Movie Awards. And then you get all the trailers, which you can probably imagine from the time are all there. So, you get plenty of extras. They're just nothing new on there, which I'm not surprised. That's something that Paramount has pretty much scrapped, is giving us any sort of new extras, so I'm not surprised we don't get anything new, but I am glad that this was still before Paramount started pulling the Blu-rays out of these, so at least we get the extras that were available to us on here, so I gotta be a little bit rewarding of that when I give this my final score. And speaking of my final score, how would I rate this Mission Impossible 4K at a score of 1 to 10? I would really give this a very, very solid 8.5 out of 10. It's not the best Mission Impossible film, but the 4K itself is fantastic. It is still a good film, though. It's definitely one you should check out. The audio track is also awesome. I mean, I would have liked some new extras, but I can't complain too much. And the fact that they really put that much effort into giving us a bunch of audio tracks in different languages is very much appreciated, and I'm sure people who speak those languages appreciate the fact that they could actually listen to it instead of having to read subtitles, which, I know can be a little bit frustrating. Not everybody has the greatest of eyes, so if you can have an audio track, even if it's dubbed, it might be a little bit better than just still having to read subtitles. So I did appreciate Paramount going above and beyond as far as the audio tracks and the subtitles go. But guys, it's also Friday. It means it's time for us to do our digital code giveaway. On every Friday's video, I'll ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one of those in the comment section below. And as long as you do that, you come back to Monday's video. I put your name on a magic wheel. I spin that wheel 2 times, and the 2 names it lands on, those people have their choice of the digital codes that you have seen on your screen before you today. But what are this week's digital code giveaway questions? Well, I figured, hey, we're talking Tom Cruise, we're talking Mission Impossible. What's everyone's favorite Tom Cruise movie? And then again, we're talking Mission Impossible, so I figured, hey, that's one of the biggest action movies of all time, one of the biggest action franchises of all time. I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite action franchise of all time? So make sure you guys answer that in the comment section below. Don't forget to come back to Monday's video to see if you are one of the lucky winners. And then while you guys are down there, if you want to keep supporting this channel, nothing supports the channel out more than by you just simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And then when you finish doing all of that, maybe you want to go find all of your IMF or MI6 friends and maybe tell them about Let's Talk Entertainment Media. We'll be seeing you around.